Hello and welcome to the Disc and Dice podcast. My name is Paul and I am joined here by my co-host Timmy.
Hello, hello.
And we are joined by a familiar face or a familiar voice, a blast from the past, former co-host, lifetime member of the Disc and Dice Society. How you going, Alan?
I'm well. Hello, everybody, and hello to you too.
So those people who are new listeners might be wondering what we're talking about. So Alan was co-host and founding member of the podcast for, I don't know how long, at least a year and a half, possibly the first couple of years that we were doing this. Mm-hmm. And it's been a long time since we've had him back here. I reckon it's got to be almost a year, I reckon, since you've been on the podcast.
About that, I reckon about that. I remember us hitting at least a year of a milestone, and we probably continued on a little bit after that until I took a step back. But having said that, it's good to be back.
Well, we just had a third birthday, right? And JT's been on more episodes than he hasn't, and he didn't come on full time until a little while after Alan left full time. So I reckon it's been closer to 2 years since our listeners have heard your dulcet tones, Alan.
That it could well be, maybe. Like,
yeah,
I kind
time
of
just flies. So yeah,
it flies because we have so much fun, you know.
That's how the saying goes, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
You know,
time flies when you're having fun separately.
You know what? It's funny that we can sit here and speculate about when was Alan last on the podcast, but I have all this information, so I can tell you that the last episode that Alan did was episode 13, which was in January 2019. So
there you go.
It's been about a year and a half since you graced us here on the Disc and Dice podcast. Speaking of episodes, this is episode 38 that we are recording today. And I guess I was about to say how you guys going, but I feel like we've already just been through that sort of process, right?
Pretty much, yeah. But I mean, like, I'm doing okay, if anyone's interested.
Timmy, of course, you are in the epicenter of new coronavirus outbreaks. So you're not in one of the suburbs that's been all locked down, are you?
No, I mean, like, everywhere is locked down as of last night, but I'm not in one of the hot spots that had it before then. But it felt like practically every other suburb between where I do live and the city was one of the lockdown ones. So it's already been close to home. So this was kind of inevitable. Like, everyone was kind of saying, just lock everything down. Like, stop cherry picking. Just everyone in the same basket. Let's get it sorted.
How you been feeling about it, Timmy?
I mean, I've been working from home since March anyway, and we live like pretty far out from the city. Like, we're last stop before we start heading into kind of central Vic. So it's only like an hour from the city, but it's, you know, it's farms and it's ranches and it's stuff around me. So I haven't been feeling it too badly because, like, we can still move pretty freely around here. Like, we've been trying to do our best to, like, socially distance and, you know, do our shopping in one go and sanitize and limit what we're doing. I mean, like, it's kind of just like that burnout from being on Twitter or turning on the TV or Facebook and everybody's like slamming the Premiere for having not opened up soon enough, and now they're slamming him for relaxing too much, and everybody's blaming someone else and everybody's angry about something. So, like, I mean, on a very personal level, I'm still, you know, I'm fine, I'm safe, I'm happy, but yeah, it's tiring looking out the door and seeing everybody so angry and scared.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Bring it back. It got dark.
You know, like you said, I guess you've been working from home this whole time, so it's not even like this is suddenly giving you like your commute time back for gaming or anything like that. But, you know, we push ahead anyway. So we thought we'd kick things off today by throwing over to Alan, because like we said, and like we just found out very specifically, it's been about a year and a half since I've had you on, and I'm guessing that you have played at least one game in that time. So
yes.
Yeah, so like, what have you been playing? Tell us.
Well, I've actually been playing a fair bit of console stuff. I've been playing, I guess, as much PC, but it's most of the stuff that I would have talked about back in the day, like, you know, your Quake 3 and your annual tournaments. flat out, and all that sort of thing. Older games that I kind of just play for fun. I'm not playing through a story or anything like that. So I thought I'd focus more on some of the fun PS4 console stuff I've been playing. And I'll get it kicked off with a great game that some might think, oh, that's just a kid's game. I don't really need to play that. That looks boring or whatever. But Scribblenauts Showdown has been one of the best crowd pleasers when we've had people around, and also just for myself and my partner to play. It's basically like, to explain it to someone who has no idea what I'm talking about, you've got a bunch of mini games. So I think there's 25 or maybe even 30 mini games. And what you've got to do, like, for example, one of them is it's like a 2D platformer type style, and you're just sort of in a castle with different levels. And before the match starts, you got for example, if you're playing with 2 people, you got 2 people, and you have to you get thrown a letter, and you have to basically make a weapon starting with, let's say, N. So you both get a chance to, there's 35,000 plus items in the game as well, by the way, that can be created. And you basically have to then beat the person you're playing against to get something really good with N. So I've probably chosen a bad letter, but let's say someone got something, what's not, okay, what's something, well, can you guys help me out? What's something with N that's a weapon that starts with N? Yeah, it's tough.
They could use a net.
There you go. A net will do.
There you go. Nice. Net will do. So let's say I get to net first, and the game will either say good choice, or it will say great choice, or it will say nothing. So I've got a net, and the other person, say, writes in, nog or something silly, like a glass of eggnog, which will probably be in the game because, like I said, 35,000 items. So then those items spawn down the bottom of the map, and you have to rush towards them. So you can go and grab, and this is just one of the mini games, by the way, but so you can go and grab your opponent's weapon instead and beat them to it, and then use that against them. Some are ranged, some are close range, and then you have to just basically battle it out till one of you dies. So the great thing about the game, though, is that it's all about your memory to a degree, because if you come up with a good idea and you get a better weapon than the other person, you got a better chance of, winning that round, for example. So that part of it is I found it super addictive, because it's kind of like, it also shows how people think, so if you're playing against other people, they might come up with something or have knowledge of a word that you never would have thought of, and you go, wow. And also, like, when you start writing a word, it will give you options to choose from. So you might choose something at random that you don't know what it is. I had it the other day where there was someone had written, so it was like K in this scenario, someone had written knife. So I thought, damn it, like that's the only good thing that starts with a K that's a weapon. But there was
katana, man, come on.
Yeah, well, good point, see? But there was something else, like a kilagil or something, spelt really strangely, and I thought, I'm just going to take a punt, that sounds pretty weird. And it turned out to be a massive scimitar type thing that was like 3 times as powerful as the knife, so I got lucky and was able to win with it. So, but it makes for a lot of really good and interesting gameplay. And a lot of the other mini games, there's a game like, for example, where you have to eat something really quickly. But if you eat it too quickly, you throw up. So you have to eat and then swallow, eat and swallow, and you have to get that balance right. And if you just rush too much because you want to win, then you're likely going to lose, because you're just going to spew up all your food. So there's like all these little different mini games. There's one where you serve food. There's a bunch. It's probably too many to like explain each one. But it's kind of one of those things where, like, simple, easy to understand gameplay. Every mini game has a little tutorial beforehand that goes for, like, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds and says, here's how you use the controls. So it's really easy for, like, someone who's never played to just jump on within seconds. They're playing, they're having fun, obviously, because it's made for kids as well. But I was just amazed at how much joy it's brought me and pretty much any of the friends around my age. I'm 34. So it's like, it's been, a really good all-round gaming experience for sure.
So I played the first Scribblenauts game. I think it was the first one that was on, like, original DS, I believe.
Oh, wow.
And that was like that was like such a unique game when I played it. It kind of blew me away in terms of what it was. Like, that one was just like these little sort of puzzles. They were kind of like, each level was a puzzle, and it was the same kind of idea where you just had the text box and you could write something in. And so it would just give you a situation, and then it would basically say, okay, write the name of an item that you need to solve this puzzle. And I guess it was the same thing where it has just thousands and thousands of items in its database. And so maybe it's something like, there's a cat in a tree. And how do you get the cat down? Well, you type ladder. And, it gives you a ladder. But that's like a really simple example. It just expanded out more and more and more. And it was always just about your imagination. So it wasn't like you're not given the tools. It's like, what tool do you need to solve this problem?
Yeah.
How can you do this in a clever way? So this sounds like it's combining that imagination aspect where you write out the word and the item appears with like some kind of combat thing, at least in the minigame you're describing, right?
Yeah, definitely. And there's a bunch of other games as well. One of them is like a fishing game, for example, where it'll say, you need to come up with like an item that is of a certain, let's say, category. Like I'm really bad at examples right now, but like some sort of item that's under an umbrella, and then you've got to write a word that falls under that. And if you don't, the fish don't like the item you come up with. So basically, like if it was like write some sort of moving object, and you've got a particular thing like let's say the letter C, and you write car, the fish are going to want to get that. So when you put your rod in, they're actually going to bite at that. Whereas if you wrote, cat's a moving object too. Something with C that's not a moving object.
Castle.
They won't go for it. Castle. There you go. Thank you so much. Then they're not going to want to bite at it. They might still, but they'll do it like half as often. So you got a much better chance of winning if you get the right thing. So, and the other thing you can do, there's a sandbox mode where basically you can just run around. There's all like different, characters. There's like animals and different things, and you can basically create anything you can think of that's within, the item range. But you can also add adjectives to people or to objects. So there might be like a magician running around the level, and you can just write smelly, and it will say smelly magician, and then stink lines will come off his head, or you could say sleepy or whatnot, and he'll fall asleep. And so there's a lot of scope to kind of just have a lot of fun with, messing with the level. And you can obviously create big things in the sandbox as well, like tanks or, helicopters or whatever. And it tends to be just like I kind of had the same feeling, or a similar feeling, I should say, as to when I first played games like Oblivion or Skyrim, where I was going, what is this game going to let me do? How can I push this? Like, I'm going to try this. I wonder if this works. Oh, that worked. That's really cool. And where can I go with it now? And stuff like that. So it was really satisfying.
That's exactly what I was thinking. It's like pushing, like seeing what the limits are in those kind of things. Like, what items can I spawn here? Like, will it let me do this? Will it let me use these two things together? And that's always really cool.
And I think making it competitive is really a masterstroke. Like I'm like Paul, I played the original ages ago. I played it on DS, and it was cool. And I remember playing it alongside a friend, and we're both trying to work out how to finish this level. Like, what do we need to summon? And you kind of end up going, oh well, I wrote this, and most of the time it's kind of similar stuff. It's pretty telegraphed the sorts of things you're going to need, but kind of opening it up and saying like, all right, now you are competing with your creativity and your vocabulary against your friends. Like that's, I think, makes it really interesting. Like I know
Definitely.
that the developers of this game kind of spoke a lot about how they were hoping this game would like encourage thought and creativity and stuff. And it always has to some extent, but I think pairing you up or putting you in a group setting to do that and compare and immediately see different results and stuff, and like you said, it starts activating your memory because you're like, I would have never thought of that word, but that is locked away for the next time I play. That's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. And learning new words and stuff too. Like I think sometimes when you start writing something and you see the list pop up, you can go down and sort of go, like when you've got when you can think of nothing. And the other thing I forgot to mention is, say your opponent writes something and gets an item, you then get a countdown. So it's like, I think 20 seconds. So you've got 20 seconds as soon as your opponent chooses something for you to choose something else. Otherwise it'll time out. So there's often these mad rushes of like, oh, I don't know. Let's just choose that. Let's have a go at that. And it's like a random word you've never seen. Then you get to see the way they've interpreted that item. And there's a lot of humor in that too, because there's another game where you've got to basically race each other across, there's like hurdles and things like that. And you need to find something that's fast to ride on. So you might choose a dinosaur, and that's pretty quick. But then someone else might say door, so you end up riding on a door, and it's really slow, but it ends up being quite ridiculous and funny too. So that's good.
So it kind of sounds like it's all very like party multiplayer focused, this version of Scribblenauts.
Yeah, pretty much. I think some people I've showed it to have said this is kind of like Mario Party. Or,
Yeah,
they've said it feels.
That kind of came to mind with all the stuff you're describing.
Yeah.
It sounds like that.
Yeah, similar.
What-
I didn't play a lot of Mario Party though, so I can't really know if it's super similar.
What are you playing it on? Like, because you mentioned everybody has to type something in. Is it like the Jackbox games where you connect your phone sort of thing? Or is it like you're playing with controllers on a console?
Yeah, just the PS4 controllers. They've got like quite a good like wheel system, so you have to scroll around with the stick to get to say 4 different letters, and you can choose that, and you go to another part and get so sort of like that. Yeah, speaking of Jackbox though, I've also played a bit of that like over the lockdown and all that sort of thing, which has been really fun. And like you said, that is all with phones, which is just great when you've sort of impromptu have people round or whatever, and you realize that you've all got controllers in your pocket, so that's also good.
Tends to level the playing field as well, right? Like you don't
Definitely.
need to have been good at video games. It's all pretty much
True.
just thought based.
Yeah, for sure. So another game I've been getting into, guys, is Unravel 2. And I didn't actually get a chance to play the first one, but the second one has some really good co-op. And basically, have either of you guys played this one?
I have seen the first one. It's like you got like it's like Yarny is the character, and he's like a thing made of yarn, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I remember seeing the first game. It was kind of this like gorgeous platformer, but I never played it, but it kind of stuck with me because it's a really striking aesthetic. But I haven't actually played it. Timmy, have you?
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same thing. I can picture it and I know the general concept, but I have not played it at all.
Yeah. So having played only the second one, it is very, very gorgeous, as you said. And there's sort of a focus on co-op in the sense that you've got a blue and a red. What did you call it, Paul? I can't remember this. Yarny, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got 2 of them, and I'm not quite sure on their backstory, but because it's kind of one of those games where there's no talking as such, the story kind of gets told through some visual stuff, and you kind of pick up things along the way. But it is mostly about platforming, mostly about kind of puzzle solving and things like that. And there's a lot of really good game mechanics with the string. So you can make like trampolines with your string in between 2 things. You can get one person up high, and then because you're always sort of connected by this string, and then they can climb up it and things like that. So there's a lot of really cool things where like you might sort of get to a point you think, oh, there's no way I can get past this, and then you realize you've got 2 or 3 different ways that you can navigate puzzles and things like that you might have forgotten. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, definitely with someone else playing with you.
How does the co-op stuff work? Because I guess I'm thinking about the first one as like a pretty like straight up platformer, but like you say, with the sort of yarn and string mechanics kind of added in there. When you go through it co-op, is the game designed for co-op? Like you can't play it single player, or is it like a separate mode? Like what's the deal there?
That's a good question. I've only ever played it co-op, so I don't actually know if it's able to be played. I'm pretty sure you can play it single player, and the AI would just help you out. But
Right.
But it definitely is a better experience co-op, because it's one of those games where you don't have 2 screens. You've basically got 1 screen, and there's never really a time when one person's out of focus, or out of the screen, I should say. You're always kind of both in view, and therefore you don't have that split screen effect, which is I always find really a whole lot better, because it's just kind of gives you that whole landscape as well. But I guess there's a lot of it's like a lot of co-op games. You need to work as a team, and it is somewhat, I guess, depending on the skill level of the person you're playing with, it can get a bit frustrating if they're continually attempting something and then not able to do it. But there are things in the game too where you can kind of like make it a bit easier, and you say, oh, I'll jump over there, and then you can just climb up or something like that. Whereas there's ways they can swing as well if they wanted to.
And is it a lot of problem solving? Like you got 2 players, You know, you're talking about people being frustrated that they can't do stuff, and I
Yeah.
assume that like there's a level of puzzle to each of the levels with this kind of
Yeah.
platforming.
Yeah, definitely. And there is a lot of puzzles. There's a lot of kind of there's a lot of parts that are just it kind of flows quite nicely, and you do a lot of sliding and a lot of like fast movement and things like that. And there are enemies in the game. I've only probably got halfway through or a quarter of the way through, but I've played, you know, maybe 8 to 10 hours of it at least. And the enemies are more like they're not going to come after you. They're more like will take a certain route, and then you know they've got a path they'll follow, and you just have to kind of avoid them. But one of the difficult things is when you're good at avoiding them, perhaps the person you're playing with misses that, and then they'll keep getting killed, or you keep getting killed, or you pull each other into something by accident as well. So that's where the teamwork element's important, and it can actually. There's been a couple of sessions where it's actually been like it has been frustrating to the point where I'm like, okay, let's just give it a break kind of thing. But when it's working well, it's super fun. And the other thing is like, it's one of those things where it is a platformer, it is 2D, but it feels like a 3D world. It feels very fleshed out. It feels very like, not so much real, but kind of like video game real, if that makes sense. Like it feels like a real place that you're going to, I should say.
What is like the general like plot storyline? You mentioned that like they do a good job of delivering some story without dialogue, but like aside from getting from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen, like what is actually the story that's going on there?
Well, so far there's been some ghosts. I think the beginning of it is basically you're outside and you're sort of trying to get your way somewhere, and then you end up in different buildings, and you'll see like ghostly figures of people doing things or trying to stop things from happening. So I haven't got far enough to know what that sort of means, whether it's, you know, this happened in the past or this is like a memory or whatnot. But they're kind of showing the story in the background, whereas you're playing in the foreground. So you and your person you're playing co-op with are kind of navigating these puzzles, getting around these enemies and things like that. But the story is being sort of told in the background of the platforming.
That sounds super cool.
Yeah, it's worth checking out.
Like, do you interact with those backgrounds in any way? Or is it sort of you're moving through the level and stuff's happening behind?
Yeah, pretty much. I haven't interacted with them yet. I'm assuming that will come up as I progress through the story. Like I said, I haven't finished it yet, but it's kind of interesting. There are like teleporting points as well, so you'll find your way to a point, and then you'll get to this sort of glowing part, and it will teleport you somewhere else, and things like that. But one of the best levels so far was running across like a building, actually it was a series of buildings, but like in suburbia kind of thing. And I believe it was raining at that point, and you're kind of like swinging off of aerials and going down like tiled roofs and things like that, and then sort of making your way past electrical boxes and all this different stuff. And it's like they do a really good job of like changing the environments up, but being very like nothing feels like it's out of place, if that makes sense. Like it's all, some of the environments quite fantastical, but some of them are more urban or more familiar. But they all flows really well together. So that's a really good part of it too.
Do you think, like, based on the fun you're having with this one, you're going to want to look back at the first Unraveled, or is it kind of like, unless it's got co-op as well, you're not really going to be interested?
I don't know. I'd be interested to see what they did with the first one, because I kind of can't imagine it being any different to how I've been experiencing it, if that makes sense. I guess like you could probably do the string physics and all that with just one person, but it just makes so much more sense when you've got two people, and some of the things you have to do, like you have to tie off things like trampolines over, say, like some electrical sparking or something. You have to one person's over there, one person's over there. You've got to get it tied off, and then you can get the other person to cross and things like that. So I'm imagining it would be quite different in terms of what puzzles they'd be able to put into it. But yeah, it does actually make me want to go back and have a look, just to see, I guess, to see how it evolved into what it is in the second one as well.
Right. Okay, cool.
Yeah, another one I've been playing recently is Crash Team Racing, Nitro-Fueled.
Oh, the
which
classic.
is yeah, which is, I believe it's a remake of a PlayStation 1 game, Crash Team Racing.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I don't
that's
think
been super
Crash
fun.
made it onto the. Oh no, Crash was on the PS2, wasn't it? But like that's like game 4, so I reckon you're right.
Yeah, because they've got like in the game as well, they've got like low poly versions of some of the models and stuff like that, so you can play as, you know, original Crash or original Polar and all this sort of thing. And
Just in
it's
case you like boxy, pixely character design.
yeah, pretty much. If that's what your nostalgia sort of gets you to want to do, and that's part of the experience for you. But the main thing I found about that one is obviously multiplayer is great. It's very similar to Mario Kart, but few subtle differences, some really interesting power ups and things like that. But the main thing that's I've found that's been interesting playing it is just how hard it is, because when I've gone adventure mode, which I guess you call it story mode, there's some races that I'm doing, and I'll be like, you know, because I've sort of learned, okay, I have to boost here, I have to do that. I know this track now. And there was one particular race that was probably the second or third race in adventure mode that took at least 25 goes to get,
Whoa.
at least. And I was really taken aback. I was like, well, am I doing something wrong? Have I got like something turned off, or is it, you know? But then I also looked at the characters, and the character like acceleration, you know, top speed, all this sort of thing. There's big differences in who you choose. So I chose, I can't remember the name of the character, but it's the girl character in that series. And apparently, like when I looked at the stats compared to some of the other characters, a lot of the like acceleration and things were quite slow. And so I was thinking, oh, that's why there's this, because there was a particular character that just kept coming out as soon as like I could see the finish line, I was about to win the race and then progress, and someone would just come straight past me on, you know, and going, it seemed almost twice as fast. So there is a fair bit, I think, to be said about careful character selection in this one.
Crash Team Racing is one of those ones that always comes up when people are talking about Mario Kart, and it seems like there's this like absolute subset of people that the hill they are going to die on is that Crash Team Racing is better than Mario Kart. Like I hear it a lot, and
Or there's
people
that
are very passionate.
There's a Sonic one too, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, but I hear the Crash Team Racing heaps more often, and when this remake came out, people were really pumped, and I kind of thought, you know, those are just the kids that had PlayStations instead of Nintendo 64s. It's like, it's just nostalgia, right? But what you're talking about there, actually having measurable differences between the characters and a story mode to boot, I can kind of understand why some people would feel like, you know, people were settling for Mario Kart.
Yeah, that differences between like karts or drivers sounds really interesting. You know, like I do tend to pick like certain drivers in Mario Kart because I think like, oh, this is the one I prefer. But if I'm ever stuck with a character who I don't usually play as, it's not like I do like noticeably worse or anything like that. You know, like the differences are kind of so minor that everything's balanced pretty much so that no matter who you get, you can compete, just sort of playing the normal way. But like the differences between them are like, they sound really distinct in this one.
Well, I have a feeling that's the case. I mean, it could be partly due to my playing and the fact that I'm not really much of a pro at this game, but I've just noticed it, and it's one of those things where I think you're sort of sacrificing handling for speed and things like that. But depending on how the level is set up, you know, certain levels are gonna really favor speed over handling if they're, you know, set up quite easily. And I just found like there was one particular level, I think it was an aquarium level, that was just, I was getting so frustrated that I was kind of rage quitting and stuff like that. And I basically never do that with games because I play games to have fun. I'm not really a hugely competitive gamer. So I found it was impacting my mood. So I kind of put it down for a while, but eventually getting back to it and beating it was great. But yeah, there's like a kind of the way you start off in adventure mode is you've got, I guess, like a map, and you're just driving around, you know, I guess it's like a home base type thing. And you can choose what challenges you do, but most of them are locked until you've done a particular few of them. And then there's a place you can go to save game and whatnot. But there's a few different modes as well. Like one of the other modes, like that was what I was discussing before, was basically the race mode. And there is a mode where you've got to just kind of grab a bunch of stuff within a time frame, like what do you call it, like coins, or they're not coins, but things like that in a particular time frame to beat that. And that's also challenging. But one of the best things about it in general, I think, is one of the gameplay mechanics is when you come up to a jump, if you hit the boost at the right time, you can kind of get a really good boost off that jump that continues when you land. And I'd say pretty much if you can't nail that, you're gonna have a real hard time getting through the game, because it just gives you so much of an advantage to be able to do that.
This sounds like it's like the hardcore kart racer compared to, the casual Mario Kart and things like that. This sounds like this is the one for like min-maxing pros.
Yeah, I'd say, because have played a fair bit of Mario Kart, it is kind of, I would say it is harder, especially to pick up and start. I mean, having said that though, it is still something you can pick up and have a go at. Like, it's not like it's super hard, but especially in adventure mode, I've just found like it's not very forgiving. It's like there's certain things as well, like you might be so close to winning, and I don't know if there's because some games will have like a catch-up logic and things like that. The similar thing that this game does in that regard is if you're a few positions back, you will get stronger power-ups at times, which will give you sort of like an invincibility with this kind of like a mask thing that goes around your head, and you can drive into people and bash them out of the way and things like that. But in general, that's the only thing I can really think of that gives you an advantage when you're further back. Other than that, it seems to be pretty balanced and yeah, very unforgiving at certain times.
Do you think that because this is, I think Timmy, you said this was like a remake of the old game or something like that, rather than like a brand new Crash Team Racing or something like that, because it is like an old sort of original PlayStation era game. Do you reckon some of the difficulty is just from that? You know how kind of like we always say like games were harder back in the day. Like games just kind of seem to have got easier now. They're more streamlined. They hold your hand more. Like you're talking about these sort of levels where you have to do it like multiple times, and you're getting really frustrated with it. I feel like a lot of games were like that back in the 90s. I wonder whether that's kind of it's the kind of mindset of that era has been brought over to this with this remake. Like it hasn't been kind of smoothed out for kind of modern gaming sensibilities. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
No, it's a good point.
I mean, when they made the Crash Bandicoot trilogy remake, people complained that it was really hard to play because of some of the things that they had smoothed and fixed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like there was apparently a bit of a drag or a delay in the way he jumped or something, and everyone was so used to that this being so snappy and clean really changed how the game handled, and people couldn't do it as well. So I wonder if there's an element of that, or an element of them trying to allow for that in this remake.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, it could be. I never played the original as well, so I'm kind of coming at it fresh. But I reckon you're onto something, Paul, because games were definitely more unforgiving in the 90s and 2000s, that's for sure.
Well, like originally, like with your Nintendos and your Super Nintendos and maybe even the first like Sega couple of consoles, games were still being developed by like the people that had started out developing arcade games that are just meant to take your dollars. They were meant to be bonkers hard, to keep making money, and it took ages for games as an industry to get out of that mindset. So like and it kind of lingered in funny ways for a long time. So who knows, maybe it is just that kind of game where it's the difficulty is ramped up because that's what games were.
Yeah, it probably doesn't.
Good point.
It probably doesn't apply here, but I feel like as well you get everything so clearly explained these days. Where if you get a new item in a game, you get like either some text on the screen or something in the game that makes sure you know exactly how you're supposed to use this, and you know the situations to use it in. Like what buttons to press, and it wasn't always like that. Sometimes you just play a game and everything is up to you to figure out. It's like, what does this gun do? Well, that you got to work that out. What does this jetpack do? Like, how do you make this work? You have to figure that out. And that's kind of gone. I think for the better, that sort of thing has gone from gaming.
The epitome of that, of course, being like the Monkey Island games. How it would be like, you have to get these random unconnected items and like, you know, put a banana peel in the toilet before you go and talk to the innkeeper about this frying pan with a hole in it that you found. And if you don't do it in that order, nothing good's going to happen. It was ridiculous.
Those old like point and click adventure games they are definitely the epitome of that kind of thing. And speaking of point and click adventure games, Timmy, you have handed me the perfect segue here, because I've been playing the Telltale Walking Dead games, which in many ways I think are kind of the modern evolution of the point and click adventure game. And they're very different to the kind of things we're talking about with Monkey Island and, I don't know, Grim Fandango and things like that. But very much I think this is sort of what that genre has come to now. So for people who don't know these games, they're point and click adventure games, but they don't kind of have the puzzle solving of those games where you have to mix and match all these items together to kind of solve various kind of problems. It's more about narrative. So you kind of make narrative choices and you have dialogue choices throughout it, almost a bit like an RPG, but then you very much have the kind of walking around, clicking at things, picking up things and working out with sort of various things in the environment there. And the one specifically that I've been playing is Walking Dead: A New Frontier, which is the third of the Telltale games. Now, Timmy, I know that you've definitely played the first two. Did you play any more than that?
No, I started replaying all of them so that I could go on to New Frontier because it'd been so long that I wanted to do it all again. But I didn't quite get there. I played 1 and 2 again, and I think I played maybe the first part of the Michonne thing because I wanted to do everything, but no, I never quite. New Frontier is like the continuation of Clementine's story, yeah? And she's aged up?
It is, yeah.
So no, I haven't played that one.
Yeah, well I played the first 2 years ago, probably just basically when they came out, and then I got kind of really burnt out on the Telltale games because I played a couple of the other ones and I just never felt like they really hit the heights of The Walking Dead. And so I just kind of took a really long break from playing any of those games. But for whatever reason, maybe because I've been playing Last of Us 2 and it's all post-apocalyptic, I've decided to give this one a go again. So I'm jumping back into this one, and broadly speaking, it's very much the same kind of game in terms of how the gameplay works. There's no sort of revolutions in how you play these games. The first thing I noticed, though, was that there is quite a big graphical improvement from those first 2 games in terms of just sort of the detail on the character models and the detail in the backgrounds of the scenes. I kind of remember from 1 and 2 that when you'd have those sort of situations where you'd be able to walk around an environment for a little bit, you know, they were still kind of detailed, but you could pretty easily notice the sort of flat textures and things like that. And this seems like a real kind of step up. There's a much better lighting model. There's a scene very early on where your character has a torch and he's kind of shining it around an abandoned car yard, and it actually kind of like lights up all the parts of the environment really nicely. So the game still has that kind of cartoony drawn look that the other Walking Dead games had. So the characters sort of have sketch lines on them as if they have been hand drawn by someone, which is, I think it's a really cool kind of stylistic touch. But yeah, in terms of the lighting and the detail and sort of the textures, it's all kind of a bit of a step up there. They do some nice things with kind of depth of field that I don't remember so much from the first 2 games. It can look a bit crappy sometimes, which the first 2 games also suffered from. You know, you can get sort of a weird animation or a weird character expression that's kind of a bit janky. But broadly speaking, visually they're a bit of a step up. I would also say that the thing I'm noticing as well is they've got a lot better at kind of, I guess you might say, sort of the cinematography of these kind of games. Or I mentioned before that they're very much about narrative. So it's the main thing is that you are sort of experiencing this story as you go through it and making choices. And early on in this one, there's some really nice use of kind of cuts and transitions and music as well that are all kind of put together really well to sort of build tension and kind of create atmosphere in the scenes. And as much as the first two games were good games, and I very much enjoyed the stories, I don't remember them having quite this level of sort of polish in some of these sequences. Like there's a thing at the very beginning of the game. This is literally the first thing that happens in the game, so I'm going to go ahead and say it's not a spoiler. It's your character is kind of going to his family house because his father has died. And, you know, this is the Walking Dead universe, so the thing is that his father has died, but really he has come back to life as a zombie, and sort of the rest of the family, you know, haven't realized that yet. And they just do this really interesting, it's kind of movie-like in its structure, where they cut the credits throughout this scene as you play it. And so you sort of are approaching the room where his father is, and then it tells you, you know, sort of directed by or written by, that kind of thing. And it's just a kind of like professional touch that I don't remember so much from the others.
Yeah, I remember feeling like there was a jump in quality from 1 to 2, but nothing quite so stark as that.
Yeah, I seem to remember that as well, from 1 to 2, and kind of the same sort of things. Like, this is possibly standing out to me more because it's been a long time since I played those first two, but yeah, at least it's what I'm noticing. What I did want to mention, though, is, Timmy, you said there that this is kind of the continuation of Clementine's story. What's interesting here is that at least as much as I have played so far, which is the first couple of episodes of this, and there's 5 episodes in it, you don't play as Clem. You play as Javier, who is a new character. Clem is in the game, and you interact with her, but you don't play as her. And I thought this was a really interesting choice because, you know, like as a brief catch-up, in the first game, you play as a character who is protecting this girl, Clementine. Then in the second game, you play as her. And I really did just expect that you would play as her in Season 3 because everyone has formed such a strong connection with that character across the first 2 games, even when you weren't playing as her in the first one, that it seems a very almost unpopular choice to then take that control away and say that you're not now in charge of her development as a character.
Yeah, I heard a lot of people felt very disconnected coming into this game because, you know, sure, in number 1, you had to get used to the characters and everything, but then number 2 had a lot of returning characters and you're playing as Clementine, who you just built this relationship, this protective kind of feeling for, and now you're controlling her. So that felt natural. And then to have her kind of pushed aside to play as someone you've never met before, it's a bold choice, if nothing else. Are you feeling like that has paid off at all? Or, like you said, it was interesting. Is that good interesting or just interesting?
So far, I'm okay with it. Like, I don't know, possibly maybe later on in this, maybe you get to take control of her. I'm not sure. But like I said, from what I've played so far, she is a non-player character in this season. I'm okay with it so far. Like, the character that you're given control of is not particularly interesting, but I would say that sort of the scenarios that I've been in so far they've been interesting enough that I'm not too bothered. And because she's there and you get to interact with her, and I guess almost because the characterization that they have given her is very much how I would have played her, I've been okay with it. I guess, you know, it's I wouldn't say that's a spoiler at all to talk about. Like, the characterization of her is very kind of like mature for her age. You know, she's still very much like a young girl in this, but she is very kind of like serious, and she kills zombies with absolutely no qualms at all, and, you know, is very comfortable with weapons and fighting and things like that. And I very much played Clementine in Season 2 as someone who had been kind of desensitized to everything by the zombie apocalypse. So I don't mind her being there because of the character they've given her. But I guess if you had played her with a different kind of personality and made different choices, it would be a bit jarring.
Right. And is this the final season, or was there another after this?
There's one more after this, and this is kind of one of the reasons that I wanted to get to this, because during the making of the final season, the whole collapse of Telltale Games occurred, and that final season was finished, but it was something where, you know, the second half of it was kind of finished by a skeleton team or something like that. So I'm actually quite interested to kind of see how that turned out in the end. So these are quite short games. I think sort of each season probably takes you about like 6 to 8 hours to get through. It's around sort of an hour and a half per episode. So they're quite short. So yeah, I decided like, you know, it's not a huge commitment to play through these, and it's been ages since I played 1 and 2, so I thought I'd jump back into it. And, you know, these things aside, so far I'm enjoying it. Again, maybe that's because it's been so long since I've played one of these Telltale games. But yeah, so far it's kind of got my attention, and I'm interested to see how it plays out. The story and the writing are like, they're pretty good. They're at the standard you'd expect for this. Sometimes the writing is like pretty crappy. Like there's a couple of sort of seemingly potential romantic interests for your character, and every time there's dialogue that is supposed to be related to that, it is so cringy, and it's just like the most awful pickup lines. It's, you know, in the middle of this like zombie apocalypse, your choices are these kind of terribly cliched things to say to your potential love interest. So I don't know, maybe they need to get someone who can write those scenes better, but, you know, generally the standard is what you'd expect. You know, the narrative in these games has always been the highlight.
You mentioned getting burnt out by the amount of Telltale games that were out there, and I was exactly the same. Like, after Walking Dead, they announced the one based on the Fables comics, and I played that, and it was fine. And even though I loved that comic series, I don't think I finished it. And there's like the Game of Thrones one, and the Batman one, and
There's
Borderlands
a
one.
Minecraft one as well, I think.
Yeah. Oh, there are so many of them, and you got to wonder, with their flagship series, The Walking Dead, which was so critically and commercially successful, with it kind of, you know, the shine wearing off of it, you got to wonder if perhaps they were spreading themselves a little bit too thin. Maybe they were passing off their best people to keep the Borderlands people happy, because, you know, they've leased their IP to Telltale to do this, you know. Maybe that's where their good writers went, because they thought this is going to be the big one. Who knows? But yeah, you're not the first person I heard say that, like, from New Frontier on, it kind of, the magic wasn't there anymore. But hopefully it's just those parts you've mentioned, and they can still kind of bring it home strongly.
I'm glad you brought up those other Telltale games, actually, because I did kind of want to ask you guys about that, because I know, Timmy, you and I have talked about the Walking Dead Telltale games quite a bit in the past. We're both big fans of the comics, so they kind of resonated with us. But have you guys played any of the other Telltale games? Like, I've played, I played the first episode of the Borderlands game, which I quite enjoyed, but by that time I was just sick of these Telltale style games. And I played the whole Game of Thrones one, which, you know, I wanted to love, because it was a property that I was really like, you know, it was right during, like, you know, the peak of Game of Thrones fever, and I was so into it, and I really wanted to enjoy it. That was the one that killed it for me. It wasn't terrible. It was just so average all the way through. And after that one, I really had to stop for a few years. But like you said, Timmy, they've done all these other ones. Have you played any of the others besides Walking Dead, and kind of have much to say about them?
I played The Wolf Among Us as it was coming out, and for those unaware, these games being episodic, they actually released each episode separately, and then at the end you could buy it as a complete one as well, or you could buy a season pass. And I'm pretty sure I played all of the first season of The Wolf Among Us. It didn't really thrill me that much. I felt like maybe I was too close to the source material, because, again, it's based on the Fables comics, and I really liked that a lot. And it kind of did the first story arc, but took a few liberties, and it was okay. Again, after The Walking Dead being so emotional, and my being so invested in that, I had very high expectations. And maybe if I played The Wolf Among Us first, I would have enjoyed it more, because it's not the right kind of property to have that much emotional investment as The Walking Dead. So you can't blame it there, but it didn't hold me quite as much, and I never went back for the second season. I played the first season of the Batman one, which came years later. I played nothing else in between because, again, I got kind of burnt out. I think I played some of the in-betweeny Walking Dead stuff. The Batman one took a lot of liberties that I didn't like, that I really struggled with. Like, I'm completely open to different interpretations of the character, but this one tried to kickstart things with it turning out that Thomas Wayne was essentially the head of the mafia, just about, or at least he was in cahoots with Falcone, who was the Batman mythos big mafia boss guy. And I thought, all right, well, this is going to turn out to be another smearing of the Wayne name that gets resolved, but it wasn't. That was just how it was. And I know, like, that put me on the wrong footing. Again, maybe I'm just too close to the source material, but it didn't seem to go like, we understand the character and we'll be true to it, but what if this? It seemed kind of just like, oh, that'd be a cool twist, let's do it. And everything else kind of came second nature. I don't know. Sorry, not second nature, came as a second thought, yeah.
The Batman one was the one that I thought kind of had potential because I guess, there's the sort of, world's greatest detective thing with Batman. And I've always felt that sort of the weakest point of these games is the action. So I felt there was a lot of potential there for kind of turning like detective mode from the Arkham games into an entire point and click adventure game, right? It's like it seems like those things are just a match made in heaven. But like, it doesn't kind of pan out quite that way?
Not really. The way they went with it is a lot more politics. Like, you actually play a lot of the game as Bruce Wayne, and that's something I liked. And you are kind of financing Harvey Dent's run for mayor. And
okay,
so there's a lot more political intrigue. They got Catwoman in there, and I think she's like Selena Kyle is dating Harvey Dent, I think, and she's kind of working things out, and you're trying to stay one step ahead. But from memory, I don't recall a lot of detective work, certainly no more than working things out in the other games. And I mean, The Wolf Among Us, the main character in that Bigby, is the sheriff, and he is solving a murder anyway. So I kind of got my fix in Telltale form of detective stories, So I don't recall that standing out to me. It's been so long, like I said, I didn't love it. It hasn't stuck with me.
Right, okay. Alan, did you ever play any of these Telltale adventure games?
No, I've been listening intently because I'm kind of like fascinated. Is this like I think I was looking up stuff in the background as you were talking about the Walking Dead one just to see what it was like, and I've seen it around in EB Games and JB and things like that, but I didn't realize these were like specifically story-driven episodic games that were out there for these franchises. So no, I haven't.
Yeah, when Paul said they seemed kind of like spiritual successors to the Monkey Island games, to give you a mental image of them, you know how in those games it's third person and you click where you want them to walk in the scene.
Yep.
And then if they walk into another scene, so out the right hand of the screen, then the camera angle might flip for the next set and you're coming like down a hallway, or you're coming in a different angle to a different room. It's kind of that, and it's all kind of like these set pieces, like dioramas that you're walking through. So they have that real feel. So, and like Paul said, all of the action is just quick time events, for the most part. So it's really the developing relationships and affecting things with your choices. Like, one big thing in this game is you talk to someone and it goes, they now trust you more, or this character will remember that, and you're like, oh, will they remember that because it's good or bad? And you really get to kind of nurture and develop these relationships however you see fit, which is a lot of fun.
Right. It reminds me, the way you're describing it, of a game I played in probably the late 90s called Night Long, the Union City Conspiracy, I believe. And that was a point and click adventure, set in a sci-fi realm and things like that, with a similar kind of setup where you'd have the the scene, and you'd be able to walk around it and gather items and things like that. So I think I have an understanding of what you're talking about, but they sound like interesting enough to check out. Like the art style's kind of cool too, like very Borderlands, reminiscent of Borderlands and that sort of thing too. Like with that kind of like what would you call it?
Cell shading.
Cell shaded. That's right. Yeah, yeah, it's cool stuff.
Yeah, definitely like that. I think the appeal of these, like I have felt, is they're basically all licensed. Like nothing they did here is an original Telltale property. It's like Timmy kind of lists them all before, you know, it's like Walking Dead, Batman, all those kind of things. I think if you find one where you like the original property that they're licensing, then you know, that's probably the one to give a go to.
Yeah, nice. I'll keep it in mind for sure.
But, you know, we've run kind of extra long in the first part of this show, so I think we're gonna give ourselves a chance to catch our breath, have a sip of water, and then we'll be back in just a few moments to continue talking about games. Alright, so we've heard a lot about what Alan's been playing. We've heard about what I've been playing, but Timmy, we haven't heard anything about what you've been playing.
Well, I have been diving into something completely new, but entirely familiar to me. I went to a friend's place a couple of weeks ago, and their kid was showing me all their Pokemon cards, and I was just like, dude, I remember Pokemon cards. These are sick. And I was just like really enjoying the nostalgia of looking through these cards and the designs and everything. And a few days later, looking at games on my phone, I had a promoted post about the Pokemon trading card game digital version. So I went, hell yeah, I'll download that. And realized that even though, like, as a kid in primary school, I collected some Pokemon cards, all my friends did, and we'd all be trading and everything, none of us ever actually played the game. It was just like for clout, like you wanted the rarest cards and then do sweet trades and get the foil ones and whatnot. And I really had no idea how the game is played. So I downloaded this digital version to give it a crack and found myself really, really enjoying it to the point that I went out and bought some physical decks as well.
Is this kind of a continuation of that Pokemon trading card game? Like, could you technically use the cards that were around when we were kids in this now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's never stopped.
That's pretty cool.
Like with Magic or anything, like kind of every few releases, there's like new mechanics and stuff. Like at the moment, the thing is called like VX cards, and they're like you know how in the latest versions of the games, they have those mega evolutions that you can charge up a Pokemon. They have the equivalent of that in the card game now as well. So like you might find older cards underpowered and stuff, but you know, you can certainly slot them into decks that you're building. But yeah, like they absolutely have. They've just always been going, much like the games, you know. Have either of you ever actually played the game? I'm sure you've both played with the cards, but have you ever actually played a game of Pokemon trading card game?
I haven't.
Nah?
I did the same thing as you, where I collected the cards when I was younger, but just never played a game. I just treated them like trading cards, not like an actual card game. So I can't say I've ever actually played it, no.
Yeah, well, downloading the app and you can just play for free. It also lets you create an account, and every single pack comes with a QR code, so you can add in whatever cards you get into the game, which is pretty cool, like a lot of card games do now. But it seems very much tied together, the digital version and the physical version. And one thing that I really like about the app, before I get to talking about the trading card game itself, is you know how like with your Hearthstones and all your different Magic versions and other digital card games, it's kind of like, yeah, I have these cards and I can play them, but the conceit of the game is that I'm really a warrior on horseback and I'm sending forth my minions, and it's this whole animated kind of battleground that you're playing on. And when the cards go out, they become the creatures themselves shooting fireballs or whatever. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In this, you are not a Pokemon trainer sending out Pokemons. You are a guy sitting at a table in a cafe playing cards with another guy who's come to play cards. It's great. I love it. Like they have the deck boxes sitting there next to the game board. Like before you start a game, it's a picture of a guy sitting at a desk saying like, "You're up next. Let's battle." You know, like there's no conceit that you're actually a Pokemon trainer battling. It's just you guys are playing the game.
That is
And I
not
kind of really like it.
what I expected you to say.
No, I think it's kind of charming and I really like it. Like you've got the game board there, and then either side is just the wood grain of a table.
That is interesting. I was 100% sure you were going to talk about how that conceit works perfectly for Pokemon because, you know, the trainer sending out Pokemon fits that fantasy. Like it fits it so snugly, but nope, that's not it.
Not at all. Nah, you were just dudes playing a card game, and don't you forget it.
I guess the question I have about it is kind of, you know, like, you know, we try to avoid getting too like nitty gritty with the mechanics, but like, is it similar to any of the things that we're familiar with, like Magic or Hearthstone or Gwent or things like that?
Sort of. Like, not for nothing, but the thing it's got most in common with is actual Pokemon. Like, the battles work the same sort of way, right? You have to defeat 6 of their Pokemon. You know, you can have many more Pokemon in your deck, but once you've defeated 6 of them, the game is over. Mm-hmm. So you don't have like a total health that you're trying to knock down. These Pokemon are going to have different amounts of health depending on what they are or how strong they are or whether you've evolved them, etc., etc. I suppose you do have like the equivalent of spells and stuff, like items that you can use and whatnot, but there's no like instants or stuff like that. One of the cool things I like about it is that you have to evolve your Pokemon. If I've got a Charizard in my deck, I can't ever just put that out. I have to play a Charmander first, and then I have to get the Charmeleon card while that Charmander is still alive. Then I have to get the Charizard one.
I'm kind of just imagining this. Does it mean that like the deck you have is a lot more focused because you're kind of everything has to be usable by these 6 Pokemon? Maybe that's enough variation that you end up with quite a diverse deck. But like this kind of stuff you're saying that, you know, if you want to evolve, you know, the Charmander, you need to have the Charmeleon card. Is the deck size smaller or something like that so that those things are more common?
A deck is 60 cards.
Okay.
But the thing is, like, when I say you have to defeat 6 Pokemon, you've got heaps of Pokemon in your deck. And like most card games, you can have like 4 of the same card normally. I'm sure there are some exceptions to that. But generally, from what I've seen, you can have 4. So like I might have 4 Charmanders and 4 Charmeleons in my deck, you know, so that I can make sure I'm going to get every chance to level that up. And even if one gets killed or faints, I'll be able to add another one.
Okay.
And the way it works is you have one active Pokemon, and then you have your bench, and then you have your hand. So your hand is all the cards that you're holding, but your bench can have up to 5 other Pokemon sitting there, so you can get those cards out and still be like drawing other things. And you can evolve Pokemon while they're sitting on your bench as well. So you are going through a lot of cards. And not only that, you have like a 6-card prize pool, so that every time you defeat a Pokemon, you get to take one of your prize cards. And so they come out of your deck as well. So you could accidentally screw yourself up by having a card you really desperately need in the prize pool. So you can't get to it without, and those get pulled at random as well. You don't see what those are. So yeah, is that starting to give you an idea of how these decks work?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of the bench, can your opponent see what's on your bench?
Yeah, the bench is face up. So you can see what other Pokemon your opponent is gearing up to come out. There are some cards you get that'll be like force your opponent to swap his Pokemon with one of his benched Pokemon. So if he's got something really strong out and hasn't been doing anything with his other ones, because this guy's got the move that can kill you in one shot, you can force him onto the bench, so he has to kind of waste a turn to get his Pokemon back out.
I love that. I love that idea that you have that bench and you can, like you say, you can evolve those Pokemon, and so your opponent, they can kind of see it coming when they know, like, oh crap, that Charmeleon has been evolved into a Charizard. Like, I'm in real trouble if I don't have something to deal with that. That seems like a really cool mechanic.
Yeah, and one cool mechanic as well is, you would know in most games you kind of have your pool of energy that you use to play cards. You don't have that in this. You can play any card anytime. The energy that you have, you need to attach to your Pokemon to power their attacks. So most Pokemon would have like a weak attack that needs 1 or 2 energy, and then a strong attack that needs somewhere between like 2 and 4, depending on their level. And that stays attached to that Pokemon. So I can look at someone's bench and be like, they're attaching all of their energy to that Pokemon. So that's who they're gunning to come out next. And one cool thing I like about the gameplay is, you would know from playing Pokemon that there's plenty of attacks that are like Fury swipes. You know, it can do 2 to 5 attacks. Or if a Pokemon's confused, it might hurt itself. Like all these kinds of like variables. And the Pokemon trading card game, the ready-made decks all come with a coin, because you always need to have a coin ready to flip, and it'll be like, flip the coin until you get a heads and do 10 damage for every tails that you got. Or when you're confused, you choose your attack and then you flip a coin, and if you get a tails, your attack misses and you do damage to yourself. You know, like it hurt itself in its confusion. So yeah, there's a lot of, they take stuff that you would recognize from the game, like the Switch or the DS or the Game Boy games, and interpret that into the card game, which I think is really cool.
That sounds great. My question that I wanted to ask was going to be about whether it kind of like communicates that experience of a Pokemon battle in the way that we know it from, I guess, you know, from the video games, really, whether it kind of, you know, it kind of gets that version of how it plays out. You know what I mean? In terms of like, it doesn't feel like you're playing a card game. It feels like you're playing a Pokemon battle. And from what you kind of saying now, it sounds like it does.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're familiar with the games themselves, the cards also kind of keep up to date with the games. Like I bought a couple of decks that have the legendary Pokemon from Sword and Shield on the front, and like that's the current version of the cards. And some of the like the supporter or trainer cards I have are like the characters Hop and the Professor Sonia from the game. Like they can do things that, you know, like one Hop's card is just like draw 3 cards. But I was like, oh, that's cool. I recognize that character. I understand who he is to me. So that makes sense that he's, you know, hooking me up with extra stuff. And Professor Sonia lets you look at the top 6 cards of your deck or something like that. So like that makes sense. She's all about knowledge and learning and investigating. So it's not only the battles that they've managed to marry to the concept of Pokemon. It's kind of the whole thing, which I think is like very nicely done without bogging down the card game in needless background knowledge, you know?
This is making me want to go back and play Sword and Shield now, which we were chatting about just in our group chat recently, Timmy, about sort of going back to that, because I think neither of us have played it in a while. You know, it's just taken one discussion about Pokemon to get me thinking like, oh, I could go a bit of Pokemon.
Absolutely. And so I'm doing the same thing I did with Magic, that we did with Magic, Paul, in that at the moment I'm not particularly interested in buying heaps and heaps of boosters and trying to improve my deck. I've kind of bought a couple ready-made decks to try and play against each other just to get a feel for the game, hoping that they're nice and balanced. But it occurs to me that I think Pokemon, more than any other trading card game, is kind of built around building your own deck. And it seems very simple in terms of how you would build a deck. So I'm kind of actually interested in trying my hand at it to some extent.
Okay. You've kind of piqued my interest with it just in terms of the mechanics, in terms of how it sounds like it plays a bit differently to some of these other sort of similar type collectible card games. So
yeah, it has enough of a difference, so it's not just like going from Magic to Hearthstone, or to Gwent, like it's still, there's enough points of difference there. Like all the Pokemon have like their weaknesses and their strengths, right? Like in the game. So, and it tells you how they factor in. Like sometimes it's like its weakness is this, so it takes double damage. It can resist this, so shave 20 points of damage off any attack coming your way.
That's cool.
But they'll all change. Like some of them will have like add 10 hit points to it if it's its weakness instead of just ×2.
I feel like when I play the Pokemon video games, I hardly ever use, I guess, what you might call sort of like utility or support moves on my Pokemon, that do things like buff attack or buff special defense and things like that. I always just kind of deck my Pokemon out with just attacks of various sorts.
Yeah.
I feel like the trading card game, because you have things like the limited hand and stuff like that, could be a bit more interesting in the battles because it might force you to use some of those moves that you otherwise just sort of dismiss in the game, or at least that I dismiss.
Well, yeah, there's two kinds, like any card that's sort of Pokemon card or an energy card is called a trainer card. And you can use as many trainer cards as you want. So, and they don't count as your turn. So you can use a potion, buff them up, and still attack. Then there are cards called supporter cards, and they're normally people like Hop who let you draw cards, and you can only use one of them a turn. So, but like, yes, you're absolutely right. The kind of things that I would hold back on doing in the video game, because I'm like, well, that's a waste of the turn. I'm just going to use my strongest attack 3 times instead of twice. You can kind of strategize a little bit more, which is important because in the Pokemon game, we have 6 Pokemon, and you make sure you've got a fire, a plant, like a grass type, water type, and electricity, and like a ghost and a psychic or something, right? So you kind of got your bases covered. In this, because you've only got so much energy you can chuck in there, and I haven't really seen many split decks apart from normal and water or normal and fire. You kind of have all Pokemon from the same class a lot of the time, and so you need to be able to do more if you're coming up against a class that is your weakness, so then you need to be using the potions, you need to be buffing your Pokemon while still attacking. So there is that would be where it differs the most from the game, because like you're more like one of the gym leaders who exclusively uses one type of Pokemon.
Okay.
And I don't know enough about it to know if you have to limit yourself to a certain kind of Pokemon, or if you want to gamble and have 3 different types of energy in your deck and hope they all come out. Like, again, I haven't looked into the deck building rules at all yet.
It sounds interesting, though, I have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It really caught me unawares. And I think it was like that nostalgia looking at these cards and then being like, I had heaps of these and I never did anything with them. I wonder what the game's actually like. And I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I kind of, every now and then, not anymore, but in the past, I used to kind of sometimes think that about the WoW card game. It's like I have such a familiarity with like that property and all these characters and that lore. Like, oh, maybe I should get into this. And fortunately, I always stop myself before I spend any money. But maybe you've gone too far already.
Yeah, like when I was a kid, I used to get the Dragon Ball Z cards because I loved Dragon Ball Z, and I never played anything with them. But every year when we go to PAX, and previous guest of the show, Butters, always wants to get the free Dragon Ball Z cards.
Mm-hmm.
I always have to be very careful because I'm like, I could get sucked into this so easily.
Hey, I just wanted to ask, Alan, you said you hadn't played like the trading card game.
Yeah.
What is your history with the Pokemon video games? Did you ever really get into those? I know that you've been a pretty like full-on PC gamer, sort of, for a very long time. You tend to like not have the consoles so often. I know you have the PS4 now. So did you really get into the Pokemon video games?
You know what? I got into the show a lot,
Yeah.
when it was on before school, or was it on after school? I'm pretty sure it was on before school. So I loved the show. Like I would be late to school quite often because I had to see the ending, because I think it was the last thing before, you had to get out the door. But the games, I never really touched any of them, to be honest. I think I remember it being massive on like Pokemon Blue and Gold and all the different colors. And was it Game Boy?
Mm-hmm.
Was that where it sort of started?
Yeah.
The games. Yeah, I remember those being massive and watching people play them and stuff, but never had them myself. So I have very limited exposure to any Pokemon games, to be honest.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, the new one's not on PS4, so that's too bad.
No, but it's listening to you guys talk about it, it sounds like something worth looking up for sure. Even like the card game aspect of it, because I'm not massively into card games, but like I do like when you were saying to me about all the different elements you need and things like that. It does sound like there's a fair bit of strategy involved, and like is it kind of like with these sorts of games? Is it kind of like half of it is the cards you have and half of it is your skill, or is it you can beat people with bad cards if you've just got the skill? How does it kind of work like that?
I'm probably not, enough of an expert to say. I was thinking
Sure.
about Pokemon tournaments, like, because you know how they have like Magic the Gathering tournaments and stuff. I see ads for Pokemon ones, and I wonder if you have to enter with one deck and hope that if you are playing a fire deck, that you don't come up against anyone with a water deck, because I feel like if you're at competition level, you're playing other competition level decks and you're going to come up against like a absolutely stacked water deck and you're just going to be screwed. Are you allowed to come in with like 3 and be like, all right, well, I'm going to play this round and then this? Or do you have to say, I'm coming in with this water deck and that's going to be it? Hope I don't come up against ground or electric types. I don't really know how it works. I would imagine the very best probably have a lot of strategy and probably have mixed decks and whatnot. So I guess, yeah, it's half and half to answer your question, but I am absolutely guessing at this point.
I guess if we're talking about something like Magic, to kind of expand your question to that, Alan, I think one of the things that I have always quite enjoyed about Magic, at least at the level that kind of, me and Timmy and JT and some other friends have played at, is that you can have a good deck, but you are at the mercy of what cards you draw. And I really liked the kind of randomness that added. So you can be playing a deck which is like, is going to be like a good counter to yours, or against even a player who kind of understands their deck a bit more because they've had it a bit longer. But if they get a bad draw of cards into their hand, then there's not a lot they can do with it. And if you get a really good hand, then you get to kind of take the lead early. And I always felt like there's enough randomness built into that system because you don't know what you're going to get in your hand that made it quite interesting. I guess at the very high level, it could probably get to the point where people can min-max their decks, so that doesn't happen as much. But at least the way we were playing it, we never felt like, I think I can speak for us to say that we never felt like that kind of thing happened. We never felt like someone's cards were just so good that you couldn't beat them.
You guys just reminded me, actually, speaking about card games, and I've been incidentally playing a lot of a particular card game. It is a bit of a segue from what we're talking about, but you guys probably remember Uno?
No, I've never heard of that one.
So I've been playing a fair bit of that at my work. It's a really good game because it's quite simple, obviously, to get into. I work with people with disabilities, so it's great for social interaction and getting people to participate in something that's quite easy to get into. But obviously, there is even when you're talking about having starting off with maybe a certain deck and thinking, say you get a couple of draw 4s or whatnot, and you get that deck to start off with, and you're playing with a few people, you think, oh, this is it, I've got it. But anything can happen, and drawing those extra cards, and then the different strategies people will employ, and some people will be really careful about not making sure they keep their cards close, and some people forget and then lean over and things, and some people will try. There's all different things going on, and it just reminded me of that. And I know it's a completely different type of game, but I've just recently rediscovered how damn fun that game is. So I just wanted to mention that.
Uno is great, man.
It's fantastic.
People might dismiss it and think it's kind of, not a serious game, but sometimes I feel like it's like the Mario Kart of card games. It's like the great leveler. You know, you can you can go into an Uno game and be like, oh, I've played heaps of Uno, but that doesn't mean anything. You know, the game is so chaotic that anything can happen. Like
you can play the best game you've ever played and then get red shelled twice at the finish line,
exactly,
and come next to last.
Exactly, and that's we watched at PAX one time. They had like competitive Uno with an audience, and like that was much fun. That was a good time.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be.
Yeah, we went through a bit of a phase whenever we went to the pub, Paul, we'd take a deck of Uno cards as well, because it's perfect if you want to sit there and really pay attention, and it's great if you're just kind of chatting and passing the time. You know, it's just a good one. Just bringing us back to Pokemon really quickly. I wanted to say, because it sounded like I might have piqued some interest there, and you might be going for the digital version just to try out the gameplay. I wanted to ready you for the fact that although the gameplay once you're playing a game is great, the app itself is trash. like it seems like a mobile version of a website less than an app, you know? Like it doesn't seem optimized for a phone, which is strange for an app, and you have to log in a lot of the time. And so I ended up making a Pokemon TCG login. And even then, the app is so poorly designed that it was really, really, really hard for me to tap the button to say, remember my password. And it kept hitting the login button instead. And so, and then every time I came back to it, if I closed it for more than a minute, I had to log in again. And once I created that account, because now it had an account and it detected a new account, it said that you must be a new user. And I actually had to do the whole tutorial twice. It didn't just upgrade my current session. So the app itself, horrible, but playing the games within the app is okay. That's the bit that they've got right. It's just the user experience around that, no good.
Yeah, to be honest, I think I'm more likely to hold off, especially if you've got a couple of physical decks, because I'm more likely to try it if I have someone I know who I can play it with, which you know will more likely than not be you, Timmy, whenever you know we're all allowed to actually see each other in person again.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I did want to say, just that I thought was really cool, is when I bought these decks, not only did they come with the fully ready to play deck, they came with a deck box to keep it in. It came with a special coin to do the flipping with, and it came with a play mat and a proper, like, I don't know, 25-page long little rule book. They still called it the quick start rules, but it came with a lot. So it came with a rule book to explain the rules if I wanted to read it. There are pointers and tips and, you know, arrows with this is what this is on the playmat, saying this is your active card, this is where you see your HP, blah, 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 all of that stuff. And it even came with reference cards for what it means if you're poisoned or confused and what you can do in your turn. So it's really setting you up to be able to jump straight into it if you don't know what you're doing. And I just thought that was really cool that it gives you everything you need. Oh, and the counters for damage as well. Give me those to punch out of a bit of cardboard as well. So you're completely set up with somewhere to store it all. It's nice.
That is good because you don't always get that in some card games. Sometimes they want you to shell out for a bigger box or accessories and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just thought that was cool. But aside from that, in terms of, you know, your more traditional video gaming, I ended up doing what I was talking about doing a couple of episodes ago. I think I mentioned it, but Telstra, which if you happen to be an international listener, is a telecommunications provider over here, has got this deal at the moment where you can pay a monthly fee and get an Xbox with the Microsoft Game Pass and online gold all set up. And I decided to invest in that because why not? Because I looked at the list of games on the Microsoft Game Pass, which is just like 100+ games that you can install and play for free for as long as you continue paying that monthly subscription, which is priced very generously. But I had a look at that and there was so much on there that I wanted to play that I invested, and that arrived this week or maybe last week. And we immediately set about downloading everything that took our fancy. Like the boys came in and said, I want that one, I want that one, I want that one. I went through and grabbed what I wanted. Shayla went through and grabbed what she wanted. And we've just been like jumping into classics and things that we'd been meaning to try and whatnot. And I'm having a lot of fun with it. But I kind of thought it might be interesting to chat about my experiences with Xbox in general, because I have been a PlayStation guy for this whole generation, which has been a while now, and haven't really been keeping up with Xbox at all. And I know, Paul, you did the opposite. You were Xbox for ages, and you've recently got a PS4. And so I want to ask you a question, because I have found so many things about the Xbox that kind of just bug me a little bit in terms of user interface and user friendliness. And I wondered, did you have the same experience going to PlayStation? Did anything confuse you there, or did you find that anything was like markedly improved?
I felt like everything was more difficult, and I am sure that is just a familiarity thing. Like I'm sort of convinced that both systems are probably equally user friendly or unfriendly, and I just have total familiarity with the Xbox One. And so when I went to the PlayStation interface, I'm constantly like, where is this? Like, where do I go to like change this thing? And then when I find it, I'm always like, why is it in this, like under like these submenus? And everything seems un-user friendly when I'm sure that, yeah, it's just that I'm not used to it.
Yeah, look, I'll agree with you, because I felt the exact same way about the Xbox. I will, as a caveat, say that I think both Xbox and PlayStation have all of their settings in weird places. I don't think either of them are particularly good, to be honest.
I agree with
one
that.
thing I will say is I think the Xbox takes way longer to start up, which really surprised me, because I got the Xbox One X, which is meant to be like the most powerful gaming console on the market, is how they advertised it. And it's got this quick startup function, which means if I'm happy to leave it running and using power all the time, it'll just spring to life. But if I have that off and I start it up from scratch, like I do my PlayStation, it takes, I don't know, triple the time to start up, like just on that green Xbox One screen, you know? And I was really surprised by that. It takes a long time. And it also took ages to set up initially as well. But who knows? Small qualms. I'm still having a lot of fun. I was just curious to know whether you got the PlayStation out of the box and went, wow, this is so easy to use, or whether it was, yeah, like you said, a familiarity thing.
I guess the other question then to ask you about that same kind of subject is the controllers, because I definitely had a period with the PlayStation 4 controller where I was like, it was hurting my hands because I was so used to the Xbox controller, and there were just enough differences in like the distance that the sticks are away, or like the angle that I kind of have to reach to press the triggers or the buttons, that playing probably through, it was probably when I was playing Spider-Man, for probably like the first 5 hours of Spider-Man, it was sort of uncomfortable with the controller. But by the time I got to Last of Us 2, now it's just like everything's second nature, and there's no issues at all. But I had like a kind of like, I don't know what you'd call it, but like a phase there where I was sort of getting used to that controller, and it took me a little bit.
And did you ever start considering those like $250 controllers that are pretty much an Xbox controller but for PlayStation?
I don't think I could ever like buy one of those like third-party controllers. Like, controller is too expensive a thing for me to ever go for like that option. Yeah.
To answer your question, I was like an Xbox guy through the 360 gen, and then I jumped across to PlayStation and had absolutely no issue swapping to controllers. And getting this one out of the box, I think it feels really nice. I think the joysticks are a bit better. I don't know if it's just because my controllers are years old now and that one's brand new, but I feel like the joysticks on the Xbox One controller a little bit more responsive. It feels a little smoother. But certainly no difficulty going between them. The hardest thing I found going both ways is because Microsoft use A, B, X, Y, and they put the X on the left-hand side of the diamond, and PlayStation have the shapes triangle, circle, X, square, and the X is in the A button position. Whenever something says press X, I now have to take a second to think about which console I'm playing on and where X is.
One of the things I liked on the PlayStation controllers, I quite like the kind of like the like big button that's sort of in the middle at the top on the PlayStation controller. Like I haven't really had to use it for anything in particular. Like I know you can kind of, it's almost like a little like touchpad sort of thing. And I haven't actually had any games that use it like that, but I have just found it's just very easy to get to when I do need to use it for something, because it's just so big. Like I can hit it with either hand. It's very easy to use when I need to use it.
Yeah, the games that do use it, like there are some games that like you not only press it, but you can like slide across it and stuff and draw shapes on it. And I've always really enjoyed games that fully utilize that. So that's definitely an edge the PlayStation has. And even though now I have both options, I'm still finding that the exclusives that are jumping out to me are on the Sony side. So I'm still gunning for that PS5. You know, I'm definitely not going to be jumping ship, I don't think. But nice to have it all.
Hey, have you guys noticed that? Well, I want to ask actually, with the Xbox, is there a speaker on the controller like there is on the PS4?
I haven't noticed one.
I don't think there is, because this is not from my own personal experience, but I have heard so much about the speaker on the PS4 controller, and I have never heard about people talking about it on the Xbox One controller. So
Yeah.
I'm just assuming that it's specifically a PS4 thing.
Yeah,
There was a couple of things on that, like as in the speaker itself, the games that use it well and subtly, I find it a really like beneficial and good aspect to it, because a lot of the times you're not expecting to hear something so close to you, and because it's such a small speaker, it has quite a particular, I guess, trebly kind of sound to it, and it kind of wakes me up sometimes when I do hear something, which I find really cool because it's like unexpected. And also the movement. I don't know if the Xbox controller has the same movement in terms of like you can go up, and sometimes you can sort of go up and down with the controller, and actually, or left and right. And not a lot of games utilize it, but the ones that utilize it well, it actually brings a fair bit of interesting gameplay options.
That's a really good one, actually. I don't think the Xbox has that. Like because the PlayStation controller you could almost use it like a motion controller, like in a simple way. Like
you do in some games.
Yeah, like the one I haven't played that much with my PS4, but the game that immediately jumps to me is in Last of Us 2. You've got like you play so much of that game using a flashlight is ridiculous, and at kind of seemingly random times, the flashlight will kind of flicker and stop working. And the way to get it working again is you have to shake your controller, and it's a really kind of nice physical motion that kind of perfectly suits the panic of losing your like light in a completely pitch black environment. That, you know, you're playing, you're looking, and then you're like, oh god damn it, my flashlight's gone. I have to sit here and like shake my controller up and down until it works again.
Because you can't do anything else, right? You can't keep aiming or moving because you need to change how you're holding it and shake it.
Yeah.
The other one that jumps to mind is in infamous Second Son. You're like a graffiti artist, and often you have to turn the controller on its side, so you're pressing the trigger with your thumb to like spray paint as if you're holding a can, which is pretty cool. Just little touches like that make it a little bit more, dare I say, immersive.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I hadn't even thought about those. I did discover the hard way that the vibrate in the Xbox controller is insane. Me and Grayson, our eldest, jumped an absolute mile when it went off on. I think like he was sitting right next to me and it was in his lap, and something happened and we both jumped a mile. And Shayla, who was like in the room but not near us, turned around and was like, "What the hell was that?" Like, it made such a big noise because no one was holding it, and it just rattled. It was crazy. But yeah, drifting back to the Xbox itself and my experience, I gotta say, this Microsoft Game Pass is insanely good value. Like, it's got a lot of games that were AAA releases. It's got some that were recent big releases, and then it's got a whole bunch of classics. And so it's really ticking a whole lot of boxes. Like, in terms of the Microsoft exclusives, it's got like the entire Gears of War range, heaps of the Halo games. I'm keen to revisit both of those franchises. I was absolutely stunned to discover that the Outer Worlds is already on there. So I've got that downloaded. All of the Kingdom Hearts series, including like the latest one, which seems nuts to me. I have downloaded like some old classics like Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, which I gave a shot, and they are so hard. I'm determined, but they are bonkers hard. And I'm just playing them on normal. Shayla mentioned I should do it on easy, but I went, I want to see what normal is. That's my thing. And oh boy, I should have listened. But we also downloaded like, Banjo-Kazooie, and it's got like this thing called Rare Replay, which has pretty much every game Rare ever did that you can now play. I'm going to jump back into the Fables games, which I think when we did our RPG episode, I mentioned Fables a fair bit as one of my favorites, and I've been hanging for a remaster. Don't need to hang any longer. It's all right here in the Game Pass. It's just crazy how much is in there.
So
like Dirt Rally games, so much.
I had Game Pass for a couple of months, sort of towards the end of last year, I think, because I started paying for Xbox Live Gold because there was some games I wanted to play online, and at the time there was like a deal where it's like an introductory thing. You pay like $5 or something, and you get, it's called like Xbox Ultimate, and it's like Xbox Live Gold and the Game Pass. And Outer Worlds was on there even then. That was on there from release, I think. I think it's because Microsoft bought whatever studio, Obsidian, who made that, because I think it's a lot of their first party stuff is on there like the day of release to try and like get you into that subscription ecosystem. But yeah, to be honest, I didn't make great use of Game Pass when I had it, just because I was playing other things, and I didn't have it for more than a couple of months. But I had the same impression you got, where just the amount of stuff that I would kind of flick past on my Xbox, and I realized I can play that right now because it's on Game Pass. And it's not like it's a bunch of old games from the 360 generation or something. It's like new games. It's recent current gen stuff, and like you say, a lot of the first party stuff is just there straight away. I think the only one that wasn't, that I really would have liked to be at the time, was Forza. That Forza wasn't part of Game Pass, which is a little bit disappointing. But in terms of value, it's really a steal. And what I wanted to ask you is, what would be your attitude towards that kind of subscription service when like the next gen comes around? We're talking, like PS5 and Xbox Series X. Like, has this done enough to kind of get you to buy into that as the way forward?
I was thinking about that too, and like only just getting this one, and so having Microsoft exclusives to keep me covered for a long time, and still being a bigger fan of the Sony exclusives. It's not going to make me jump ship for the next gen, but I honestly do feel like this is going to be where gaming goes, just like everybody kind of ditching live television for the most part and going to the streaming service of your choice, and even Foxtel having to have a streaming version of its service and like making its own boxes redundant. I feel like EA have got their one now, and Microsoft have got this one. Surely Sony are going to feel the pressure to have to compete, right? Because they're doing you get 2 games free every month. But this is just what you get now when you have a gold pass for Microsoft, right? So I think Sony, I would be very surprised if they don't do something similar to this come PS5, if there's not some sort of overhaul. And I think, most things in this world are moving from an owning model to a subscribing model. And I think games are going to go exactly the same way. And so I don't think it's going to be a choice. It'd make me look twice at the Xbox if I had any question. I'm pretty sold on the PS5, but it is a strong value proposition.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting that I say a few years ago, but even sort of quite recently with what was it, Google Stadia, that the discussion was about like whether the similar technological change from sort of traditional TV to Netflix and things like that would be streaming games like on Google Stadia and things like that. But I agree with you. I think this is more likely to be the change, that it will not be that, you stream the actual processing from someone else. It will be that you buy the console and then you pay, $15 a month and you just get all the games. That will be how it works.
If Google Stadia knew what was good for them, they would try to be the Netflix of this generation of consoles. Like no one's investing in that technology because it's untested. Who knows what's coming on it? And, like you needed some crazy amount of bandwidth to make it work. Why would I do that when I already have a PlayStation or a PC or whatever? But if they could use that technology that they were trying to get people to buy into, to be like, yeah, streaming's the future, get all your games in one place. It doesn't matter if you have an Xbox or a Netflix, or a PlayStation. That could be the way they kind of salvage the years they put into developing this software.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, that's for sure. Like I think you're right about Sony having to offer something similar, because it has been such a kind of success, the Game Pass model, and like you said as well, I think we're just moving towards that. It's not even a case of like whether Microsoft have offered it. It's just like that's the way forward, and yeah, that's what they're going to go for. I'm still a bit hesitant about it as well, in the sense that, like you say, you're giving up ownership of these things, and really it's just you're moving to a renting 100% of the time model. But, there's all kinds of questions on PC as well about, technically if you buy games on Steam, you don't own like a physical copy that you can keep. It's like if Steam collapses one day, which will, be terrible for all of us if it does, like what happens to your ownership of all those games there? So, this is across the whole industry.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Well, I kind of managed to corner that whole second half of the podcast to myself. So thank you, fellas, for indulging me. But I'm going to throw it back to you guys now before we start wrapping things up. I'm interested to know what you guys are going to be playing, Paul, before the next episode, and Alan, just before the next time we talk to you in maybe another year or so.
Sure. So I was going to briefly mention I've only just started Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. So I've played probably half hour or 45 minutes or so worth. And it's really good so far. Like very cinematic, great gameplay. It did kind of remind me a little bit of Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast. That was an older game with lightsaber play and things like that, running on the Quake 3 engine that I really enjoyed back in the day. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting more into that and actually kind of gaming in a way that's hopefully going to be immersive, not like gaming while doing something else like listening to podcasts or music, but actually just sitting down and gaming, speakers up, lights down, getting into it.
Cool.
That's a good one, actually, just on what you were talking about, Alan, because I think Timmy and I both played Jedi Fallen Order to various extents, and I totally get what you mean about it feeling like it's a bit of a throwback to those old Jedi games. Like Jedi Outcasts. Like I guess I played a lot of the Jedi Knight games, which they were a bit different. They were a bit like that kind of like, it was almost like a first-person shooter type thing as a Jedi, whereas Jedi Outcast definitely had that like that more kind of, if I can say, like arcadey kind of console feel to it in a sense, which was really fun. But yeah, Fallen Order is pretty cool. So I hope you have fun with that one.
Yeah, cheers. I think I will.
In terms of myself, I'm not really sure, to be honest. I'm thinking maybe Pokemon after our discussion on this episode. I know there's some new DLC out for that, which is actually like some kind of new story content, not just like a bunch of new Pokemon. So maybe I'll give that a go. Besides that, I'm hoping to play a game called Her Story, which I don't know if you guys have heard of. It's kind of one of these really short little indie games where you all you do in the game is you watch a bunch of clips, live action clips of a woman being interviewed by police, and you have to use like a search system to piece together a mystery out of those clips. And it's kind of been quite critically acclaimed as like a little kind of puzzly mystery solving sort of thing. And I'm kind of interested in giving that a go before the next episode to see what that's like. But yeah, I don't have anything to say about it now, so we'll have to see where that goes.
As for myself, I am nearing the halfway point of The Last of Us Part 2. So I'm definitely just going to try and forge ahead with that one. I have really been making an effort to not start anything major on the Microsoft Game Pass. Like I've got plenty waiting to go. Like I'm dying to play Outer Worlds, and they had Observation, which Paul, you piqued my interest on when you spoke about that months ago now, I reckon. So lots to do, but I'm really trying to be disciplined and get through The Last of Us Part 2, not only because it's a great game, but I'm keen to discuss that with you in our upcoming expansion episode. So that's really going to be it for me. But of course, I am also going to try and get into a couple of IRL Pokemon trading card games and see if keeping track of the rules myself, it's as much fun as the app I've been playing.
I'm interested to see how that goes. But I think that's probably about it from us for this episode. So it was really good, I think, to have the original band back together. This is, the team from episode 1.
That's it. Original cast reunion.
Yeah,
I definitely enjoyed it.
I hope everyone has enjoyed the 2020 remaster of the Disc and Dice podcast.
Yeah, it's been great. I just want to say it's been great to reconnect with you guys and talk games again. Yeah, lots of fun, as always.
Well, thank you for coming on.
Joining us, mate.
No worries. It's been great.
Alrighty, well that does it for us once again. If you would like to share some thoughts or ask any questions of us, you can get in touch with us in a whole bunch of different places. The best place for a question is probably our email address, which is discanddice@gmail.com. But of course, you can get at us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're now on YouTube. If you prefer to listen to these episodes there, we try to get them up pretty quickly. Just search Disc and Dice. On Instagram, it's Disc and Dice Podcast. But everywhere else, Disc and Dice will do the trick. We hope you guys have a fantastic fortnight, and we'll hopefully be coming to you very soon to chat about The Last of Us, and then get JT back on board for some regular discussions about games. Catch you next time.